So welcome back to the channel, and today I'm reacting to all of your hot takes. So a few months ago, I actually asked people on my community tab to post their hot takes, and I got loads of really spicy hot takes. So what I'm going to do over the coming, I guess, months and weeks, because there's so many hot takes to go through, I'll be reacting to some of the hot takes that I find really interesting. So today I'm going to react to 5 of your fashion hot takes and give my thoughts on what I think with your hot take. So let's get straight into it. So Gemini Siki, that's an interesting name. So this person says, the repeated attempt to redefine masculinity by putting men in women's clothing will always make me roll my eyes and actually shows a weird elitism that never changed. These guys back in the day wore pearls and high heels. Let's bring that back. Those guys were also rich as hell and owned slaves. Edit. Holy, which led me to a real hot take. Women dictate a lot of men's fashion. Feminine menswear will never catch on when women don't find it cool on regular guys. Famous dudes don't count. If regular guys got more play in a maxi with some pearl earrings, men will be raiding their mum's closet. So, okay, fair enough. So I think there are 2 hot takes in this. So I think let's start with the first one in terms of this idea of a repeated attempt to redefine masculinity. Now, okay, what I will say is I agree and I disagree at the same time. I think that fashion is really complicated. And it's really, when we have this idea of like gender in fashion, a lot of it to me doesn't make sense. Like I find it weird that in society we see handbags as for women when it's just a bag. It's just a thing that you carry, that you put stuff in. Why should that be gendered? It doesn't make sense. And bags don't, like how tall you are or how short you are or how big you are or how skinny you are or what your body proportions are have nothing to do with your ability to carry a bag, right? It's not like clothing. So when it comes to accessories and things being gendered, I find it exceptionally strange. However, with clothing, what I will say is that as much as we want to make things genderless, and as much as I understand that we have this conversation around genderless fashion, sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. So when it makes sense is, going back to fashion being so complicated, there are so many ways that people decide to dress. Some people are into anti-fashion and they like clothing where the silhouette is not close to their body. They like things being deliberately oversized. It's kind of like this, Demna Gvasalia Balenciaga effect, or Martine Rose, or designers like that. People like wearing their clothes and it's deliberately oversized. It's not supposed to fit well or fit right in the traditional sense of what good fitting clothing is. And so in that sense, I guess genderless clothing makes sense because anyone can just wear things that look oversized and don't necessarily fit perfectly. However, if we're talking about fit in a traditional sense, you need to remember that once again, as much as we want things to be genderless, men and women aren't actually the same. And I mean this in terms of proportions, right? Like a lot of women have boobs, men don't. So if you have the same shirt, how it looks on a woman where they have boobs and it's pushing the shirt outwards that way, versus a man where it's going to be flat will make the thing look different. Women on average have a lot smaller waists than men. So if you're making genderless trousers, someone has to lose out somewhere. It's either your silhouette is either going to lean more towards menswear or lean towards women's wear, and then it will fit better on men than women, or if it leans towards women's wear, it fits better on more women than men. So it really depends. So someone always loses when you do the whole genderless thing. And I do think that kind of where I think this person is coming from, because this person said it makes me roll my eyes, is because, and what does make me roll my eyes is when a designer has clearly always been a menswear designer and they design menswear, and then when the conversation came around genderless clothing, they started to be like, when I design my clothes, I don't really think about gender. I don't really, consider gender in anything I do. Everything's genderless. This is 2024. We should be ahead of genderless clothing. Just editing here, but I thought I'd pause it to add more context to the point I was making. So something I've noticed in fashion is a lot of quote unquote genderless designers, all of their clothing looks like menswear. in the sense that I only see designers making the argument for their clothing being genderless when they make hoodies and sweatshirts and, you know, jackets that anyone can wear, like a Mac jacket and things like that. I almost never, rarely do I see a designer outwardly making a case for their clothing being genderless when they are designing extravagant dresses and, you know, really long skirts, unless their names are Rick Owens, Charles Jeffrey Loverboy, or Tom Brown, to be honest. Those are like some of the few that do that sometimes. It's almost like you have to ask questions. If you're really, as a designer, pushing for clothing being genderless and us not considering gender when we talk about clothing, surely you would attack the clothes that are seen as more feminine. For example, in society, things like dresses, things like skirts, more than you would attack things that, let's say, women don't get judged for wearing, because no one's going to judge a woman for wearing a suit or a hoodie, because those are kind of already seen as genderless in society. So when designers try to market themselves as pioneers in the genderless space and all they make are hoodies and shirts, and there's nothing really challenging gender stereotypes and norms, it's just a bit lackluster in terms of, yeah, I don't think you deserve any credit for saying that your hoodies are genderless. And I'm thinking, but you're a menswear designer, and me, from my experience making patterns, I've seen your patterns before. Those are menswear patterns. You're just putting menswear on women, which is fine, by the way, but kind of like acting like you're actually designing for both men and women is not true, when literally your patterns are designed for men. The clothing is designed for men. That's the main consideration in the clothing that you're making. It's a bit strange. So yeah, I just think that people should just dress how they want to dress. However, sometimes I do think twice when people do the whole genderless thing, or people say everything has to be genderless. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, I do not want to go to Savile Row and get made into a genderless suit by a tailor. I want a tailor to look at my extremely male proportions. I have crazy broad shoulders, a massive waist, like huge arms. That is like, that's not, most women are not built like that. So I don't want a tailor to be like, oh, well, it's 2024, it's genderless, and make me an ill-fitting suit, right? So sometimes, going back to it, sometimes the genderless thing works, sometimes it doesn't. But I do think that in fashion spaces, sometimes we try to be so progressive that we go too far into the realm of where it doesn't even make sense. Like I said, like, I don't want to go to Savile Row and be made into this like weird, ill-fitting, genderless suit just because we're trying to be progressive. No, I want a suit that fits right. However, if I'm wearing Yoji, or, you know, that's kind of what I'm doing, I want to wear something that fits that way deliberately, that's a different story. So I think both things can coexist without one side. And this is why I really understand this hot take, because there are fashion people that I encounter all the time that just like, gender doesn't even make sense. Why do we even talk about gender anymore? And it's like, okay, there are some situations where it's valid. Oh, another pause. Here we go. So kind of continuing this idea of everything has to be genderless and we're in 2024, me saying, you know, it's not every situation that makes sense. I'll give you a really good example. So football is a sport that is very dear to my heart. Of course, I grew up in England. I grew up playing football from a young age. Now, women's football is exploding, and I'm really, really happy about it. I myself have been to a few Chelsea women's games. I'm a Chelsea fan. Women for the longest time had to wear men's football boots because football boots weren't made specifically for women. So it's kind of this idea that, you know, women just have to buy the boots made for men and it should work for them. And this happened until people started carrying out research on the effects of women wearing men's boots or boots designed for the feet of men. And they started to do loads of research and realize that because of women's hip position and because of the different shape of most women's feet, it was causing a lot of injuries. And it was leading to a lot of injuries, especially with the ACL and other knee injuries for women. So brands like Nike and other brands started to change this idea and started to make women's wear specific football boots to kind of combat the injuries that women normally face, especially for wearing boots that aren't actually made for the shape of their feet. So that's what I'm saying. the genderless thing, I get it. I get that we're trying to be progressive. However, you can't just throw biology in the toilet. And sometimes that is a consideration that is very important in terms of the shapes of our bodies, the anatomy of our bodies means that sometimes our requirements body wise is very different. And I think that shouldn't be ignored. And that's why I say I really understand this person's hot take. Now, to go to the second part, this person saying, women dictate a lot of men's fashion. Feminine menswear will never catch on when women don't find it cool on regular guys. Feminist dudes don't count. If regular guys got more play in a maxi with some pearl earrings, men would be raiding their mum's closet. Once again, I agree and disagree. Something I do find really interesting, though, something I find really, really interesting is months ago, I posted something along the lines of, I think someone commented this on a YouTube video I made about, can men wear skirts? And I posted this comment on my channel because the person said that the reason why men don't wear skirts is because women don't find skirts on men attractive. And so I put it on my story and I asked women that follow me on Instagram, I was like, is this true? According to the women, is this true? Do you guys think that women dictate a lot of men's fashion? In other words, do you guys think that what women find attractive on men determines what men actually wear? And almost without fail, every single woman that follows me on Instagram said, no, that's not true. These men are insecure, which I found kind of strange because I think both things can be true. I think first thing to mention is that my audience, like the women that follow my channel, are obviously into fashion. And so I think in the fashion world, we think about fashion, especially the type of people that watch this channel, we think about fashion a bit differently. It goes back to the initial thing. We don't have this baggage of gender the way that the everyday person in society does, right? So I can wear a Tom Brown skirt and a Rick Owens skirt and not care what anybody thinks because I'm just like, it's just a skirt, who cares? However, that's us in fashion. And I am lucky enough to wear, let's say, women I've dated in the past, they kind of understand fashion too, to where they wouldn't judge me if I wore a skirt. So I can wear that even in dating, it doesn't affect me in dating. However, that's not the case for most men. A lot of women I know that aren't in the fashion scene, they're very like, when I wear a skirt, they're like, what are you doing? What are you wearing? What the hell are you wearing? So I can understand how a lot of men, especially if they're not in this fashion world where everyone encourages you to be yourself, everyone encourages you to be different, it's almost championed in this side of fashion to be yourself and to be unique. In wider society, outside of this tiny little bubble, that is not the case. And that judgment can actually affect you. Like if you work in finance and you're wearing skirts, you won't get a job. Or like so it can actually start to affect your actual livelihood, having friends, having a friendship group, it can. So that all of that considered, I do think that in general society, what women find attractive in straight men, that's kind of, it perpetuates what men wear. I do think that that's true to an extent. I don't think it's all the way true. Not all men are, straight. There are gay men, and obviously that stuff doesn't apply to gay men. There are bi men who also don't care about that sort of stuff. However, most men in the world are straight. And also most people in general are not into fashion the way we are. How many people do you guys think know of brands like Jill Sander and stuff? Like most people don't know what the hell I'm talking about outside of my fashion bubble. And I have so many friends outside of fashion who I can use them to gauge what people outside of this bubble think about just the fashion space in general. Like I have friends from when I used to play basketball and none of them know what the hell I'm talking about most of the time when it comes to these brands. So yeah, I think two things can be true at once. I do think that in general society and wider society, what women find attractive, a lot of men do. I half agree. I don't think every man plays by these rules, but I think most men, what they wear is based on, they wear clothes based on, they don't want to be made fun of by people around them, especially women, especially if they're straight and they find women attractive. The last thing they want is for an attractive woman to them to say, oh my God, you look terrible. What the hell is that? That you're such a feminine guy, blah, blah, blah. A lot of guys in general, wider society, they are heavily affected by that. Am I affected by that? No, I could care less, but then I'm in this tiny fashion bubble where everyone understands, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I think we need to sometimes broaden our horizon outside of our fashion bubble and actually understand that there's things going on in wider society that doesn't involve our little fashion cliques online. Now, this one is a very, very hot. So, this person said, fashion attracts narcissists, which in turn promotes predatory behaviors. So many instances of essays, for example. Now, I don't necessarily agree. I understand where this comes from because I think that a lot of people in fashion are very problematic. Like every angle, every side of fashion is problematic. Whether we talk about, fashion designers that abuse their power or photographers that abuse their power, modeling booking agents, agency people that abuse their power, people that get lost in the source, people that start to believe in their own hype and their ego goes through the roof and then they think that they're just above the law. That I see that a lot in fashion. However, I don't think why I don't necessarily agree with this hot take is I don't think that this is something that applies only to fashion. And so because I see it in so many other industries, I don't think there's something unique about fashion that attracts narcissists. I think that when people get into positions of power, you see the kind of person they are. People who are nice people and kind-hearted, when they get into positions of power, they continue to be kind-hearted. And people that always had that mean streak or that chip on their shoulder that when I get into power, I'm going to show all these people that didn't believe in me. And those are normally the people that end up doing very toxic things. And so we see this all over the place. There's people in finance that abuse their power that I know of. Not going to get into that. There's people in all sorts of industries. I mean, geez, like we're just hearing about rumors in Formula One because Formula One is a sport that I follow. The allegations of Christian Horner. He has nothing to do with fashion. We see things happen in all industries in the world, I think. Problematic things, the pharmaceutical industry, where people they won't trial a drug properly and people are literally dying testing these drugs and they just don't care. So I don't think that's only unique to fashion. I understand the sentiment because a lot of people in fashion are problematic, but I don't necessarily think there's something so specifically unique about fashion people or the fashion industry that attracts, abusers and stuff like that. I think that there are abusers in every industry that exists on the planet. Even doctors, you see doctors abusing their power, doing illegal surgery. Like, let me not even get into it, but I just think that these things happen in every single industry. It's not just fashion, to be honest. So this hot take I really like, actually. So what this person said is, many fashion houses have lost their identity due to the internet. Social media apps cause ridiculous micro-trends, which causes designers to be unable to bring innovation in a rapidly changing world. Oh, I half agree. Half agree. I think that TikTok and stuff like that has definitely quickened the trend cycles, and I think trend cycles are way too fast right now. It's way too quick. I can't even keep up, and I don't try to anymore because it's not going to work. However, I think the bigger issue, which has led to fashion brands having no identity and fashion brands all being the same, is actually just this hyper consumerism, hyper capitalism by all the major brands, and the fact that, they're chasing growth. I just released a Patreon podcast episode where I talked about this quite in depth. This idea of when all these luxury fashion houses started trading publicly and started having shareholders, they had to cut corners because to achieve growth every single quarter and to be multi-billion-dollar houses, and a lot of these brands now, Louis Vuitton just reached 20 billion euros in a financial year, and now they want to go even further and even further and even further and even further. So the only way you can do that is you either have to get cheaper labor, so you have to go somewhere where the labor laws are worse, you have to make the quality less, you have to use cheaper fabrics, you have to, do all these things to reduce the cost so your profit margins get higher and higher. And they will just continue doing that until everything crashes, in my opinion. So I think it's this hyper capitalistic idea that is causing these brands to have no identity, because in pursuit of making more money, they don't want to be niche. They don't want to have a design aesthetic that won't appeal to everyone. These brands want to be as mass appealing as possible. That's why every single brand looks the same these days. Gucci looks like La Mer, which looks like The Row, which looks like Xenia, which looks like Phoebe Philo, which looks like Jill Sander. I could literally go on forever. That whole thing is because those kind of plain, easy to wear, very commercial clothes appeal to most people in society. And that's why these brands have that aesthetic. They don't want to be like what's a niche brand? Like maybe not even Rick Owens, because Rick Owens is niche, but it's kind of semi-niche. But I'm thinking of something way more niche, like a Martine Rose or something like that with those silhouettes, right? They don't want to be that because they know that if they have a very niche silhouette and if their things are so niche, then they're never going to make 20 billion euros. So I think it's more to do with money than anything else, actually, which is why a lot of these brands have lost their identity. And I honestly, the state of luxury fashion now, I cannot stand it. I talk about it so much because I just want people to know the quality is horrible. Everything is going down the drain. Don't buy these brands. End of story. That's why I talk about these brands so much. But yeah, I don't think anything that luxury brands do right now interests me, to be honest. I talk about, their runway shows because it's good for engagement and bringing a new audience to my channel. But in the grand scheme of things, do I care about what these brands are doing? Not really. I literally don't care. And this next hot take is kind of similar to the last one by Purple Swag 2313. Brands care more about engagement than creativity. And kind of similar to what I said before, I totally agree with this, but this goes back to money. Brands care about engagement because engagement numbers lead to sales. The more eyeballs see your stuff, the more chances you have of selling things to people. So I think that's the bigger reason why, they're always going to care more about engagement than being creative in any sense of the word, because that is what brings in money. That's what brings in revenue, like interest, attention. So yeah, totally agree. I don't actually think this take was that hot, to be honest. I think most people will agree with that, to be honest. Okay, so the last hot take I'm going to be mentioning today is fashion weeks, as we know them today, are and will always be unsustainable, creatively and environmentally speaking, without even considering resort and pre-fall. Fashion week pushes overconsumption by making the previous collection irrelevant, although some brands build upon each collection. I don't think this take is hot, but I totally agree with everything that was said in this take. But it's not a hot take, though. I think Fashion Week, it is unsustainable, but I think Fashion Week is definitely a lot more sustainable than like a pre-fall collection or all those, because a lot of these pre-fall and resort collections are location-based. So a lot of these brands fly their VIP clients and journalists and press and all these people, celebrities, over to a certain location just for the purpose of going to a show and then flying them back. And like, can you imagine the carbon footprint on that? Whereas with Fashion Week, everyone is kind of going from where they are into this one place and everything gets done all at once in this one place and then everyone goes back. So I think it's more efficient to have this one place where everyone does everything, or this one city, in the sense of like Milan and Paris right now, because those are the two main ones. I think it's more sustainable to have two cities where every single thing happens, all the shows, all the buying appointments, all the events, all that sort of stuff. Everyone just goes to there all at once and then goes back to their respective places, rather than this show is in Morocco. So we're going to fly everyone to Morocco just for this show and then they're going to go back. Then we're going to have this Dior show in Tokyo. Then we're going to fly everyone to Tokyo. That's super unsustainable. And I think creatively, this is something I've talked about. I actually made a TikTok about this not too long ago, where I said that something that I really don't like about fashion is how fast-paced it is. And I think this is why a lot of fashion designers self-destruct. Something that I always mention, and I'll mention it again, is in the Kingdom of Dreams documentary series, you can clearly see how the pressure of having to churn out all these collections really destroyed the mental health of a lot of designers like Marc Jacobs, who ended up in rehab, or Alexander McQueen, who eventually got addicted to drugs and unfortunately took his life. You have John Galliano, who self-destructed loads of times. So I think it's not good for the mental health of fashion. It messes up creativity. Fashion designers can barely come up with new ideas when they have to have a show, a new collection every month or two. I just think the whole thing is so unsustainable. And that's why I really respect Dries Van Noten, because Dries Van Noten never did that. And Dries Van Noten is a designer who was kind of trying to lobby the fashion industry to slow down. And I remember when COVID first happened, he had this whole thing he was lobbying for where we need to go back to a fashion system where it's just spring, summer, and fall, winter, and that's it. And everyone was like, yeah, Dries Van Noten, we agree with you. And immediately the lockdowns ended. Everyone went back to the regularly scheduled program of loads and loads and loads of collections a year. So yeah, I think the whole thing is totally unsustainable. I really hope that fashion has a reckoning. I really hope, and I don't hope this because I want people to lose their jobs or whatever, but I hope that the whole fashion industry almost self-destructs, because I think the whole thing is a mess. This whole idea of brands wanting to grow year on year on year on year and their quality going down and just thinking that's okay, and this lack of craft and lying in the marketing. I just think all this like shadiness and dodginess of the whole fashion industry, I really want it to backfire, especially with all these massive luxury brands. And I think that when the whole thing self-destructs, that is the only thing that will be enough of a day of reckoning to make people change their ways. I think that when money is on the line, people always follow the money, unfortunately, especially these massive conglomerates that are involved in fashion, whether, Tomorrow Group or, New Guards Group, any group really, LVMH, Kering, all these conglomerates, OTB, whatever, they're all just going to follow the money. So the only way we can change the fashion system is if, consumers demand more, or if the whole thing self-destructs to where it starts to affect the money of these crazy, 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 massive, rich conglomerates. But yeah, this was fun, reacting to the hot takes. Hopefully I can do another one really soon. Let me know your thoughts on any of the hot takes that were mentioned in this video, and I'll be back with another video very soon. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.